Who's the biggest loser your son-daughter has dated? Story 1. My sister dated a guy who lied about being a Navy SEAL. Apparently there is like a whole community of people who do that. Just go around unemployed living on telling their SOs when they disappear for weeks at a time that they were deployed. It never made any sense to us, and she broke up with him for other reasons and gets really pissed off if anyone mentions the relationship happened. He was a creepy dude who took advantage of her trusting nature and that she was at a low point in her life, and I regret not doing more to call him out on his obvious bullshit. He's still in the area doing God knows what, probably trotting out the same to new women. I hope one day he gets his beat by a real Navy SEAL. Story 2. My husband's cousin was married to a man who cheated on her for months, and then moved his mistress into their home and tried to convince his wife that they could all be lovers together. He also got into the illegal pot dealing game after Colorado legalized weed. Story 3. My really quite intelligent daughter once dated a lad who didn't know the difference between the sun and the moon. Not joking. Edit. To clarify slightly, ages, my daughter was 18 and the lad was 20. He thought the moon glowed because it was the same as the sun, i.e. a ball of nuclear fire, although I imagine he knew it wasn't as hot. He had no idea at all that the moon was reflecting light. He came from a family of people who saw very little point in education. His mother had never worked, none of his family worked, he didn't work, he was actually a nice lad, but difficult to converse with due to his very low level of education. Story 4. Not my kid, but my brother. He dated this crazy possessive chick who once buried one of his shirts because another girl complimented him on it in front of her. She also totaled his car after lying and saying she had gotten her license back. She gave $400 to a fake iPhone scammer website Western Union because they are a legit company. I saw pictures of their warehouse and everything. I googled warehouse. The picture on their site was the first one that came up. She even paid $100 more to expedite through customs when the delivery didn't arrive when expected. And the pièce de resistance, she killed his dog. She left Excedrin PM on the coffee table and he chewed up the bottle. By some miracle no pills got out and crisis averted. It was explained to her that the pills would be fatal to the dog. She bought another bottle and left it on the coffee table again. This time dog ate half the bottle and his kidneys failed. Sucks because he was the sweetest smartest dog I've ever known. TLDR bro dated a girl that killed his car and dog. Story 5. My wife and I have very limited contact with our daughter because of the guy she was dating and now ended up marrying. Our ability to intercede was limited because she had moved to the other side of the country, ultimately ending up in Alabama. It's painful and incredibly unfortunate, but we are just holding out hope that someday things turn around and she opens her eyes. Our daughter was staying with a friend, and she began dating this guy she met while working. She always struggled with showing or expressing gratitude, and she had a falling out with her friend of 10 years, who felt like she was being taken advantage of. Our daughter wouldn't pay rent and did nothing to help out around the house. Friend had a new marriage and a new baby also, and so our daughter was asked to leave. She lived with her manager, until they also had a falling out, resulting in her quitting her job also. This caused her to move in with her, who we'll call Tim. Tim lived in a trailer on the same plot of land his parents and grandparents lived on, and was likely a drug dealer. He had been in the army for a few years before getting dishonorably discharged for drug use. Given that my wife and I are both army veterans, his "I'm a proud veteran" attitude was additional reason to dislike him. He had no real job, which would be a trend. They ultimately got engaged once our daughter became pregnant. We were then contacted by a woman who wanted to warn us about Tim. Turns out she was his wife. They had been married years earlier, had a kid together, and Tim was refusing to sign the divorce papers. She informed us that he was emotionally and physically abusive, and that he had been convicted of it. We checked and this was true. He was also currently on trial for rape, was also true. She also claimed he was currently sleeping with his 15-year-old cousin, who lived in one of the trailers on the family lot. No evidence other than circumstantial. He's a POS evidence. My wife immediately called our daughter to tell her this and to try and let us buy her a plane ticket back to our house so she could get back on her feet. Turns out, our daughter knew about all of it and refused to believe any of it was true. He wasn't dishonorably discharged, she said. We sent the picture of the DD-214 his wife had. He wasn't an abuser. We sent the court case and local news article. He was on trial, but there was no way he had raped anyone. Case was ultimately dismissed last year when the witness decided they didn't want to testify. She said she'd come for a visit, but only if she was allowed to bring Tim. We showed her texts from Tim to his wife saying he was only with our daughter for the money. She had been begging money off relatives, though we had stopped giving at that time, and all have stopped now after we talked to them. We also showed her his Tinder and Facebook profiles where he was attempting to pick up other women. Nothing made a difference. She had the baby a few months later. We were going to go out for the birth, but we told our daughter we wouldn't go on to their family trailer park. Tim knew what we thought of him now and apparently made threats toward us. We told her we'd come out and stay in a hotel, and we could visit her there. She refused and said Tim wouldn't let her do that. If we wanted to see our grandchild, it would have to be at their trailer. We decided not to go out for the birth, which tore my wife apart. Our other daughter has not spoken to her sister since that day. Everything seemingly came to a head when our daughter called us out of the blue one afternoon. Apparently Tim had gotten angry and she was scared for her safety. We immediately booked a flight for her, and our daughter arranged for a neighbor to take her and the new baby to the airport. We then could not get a hold of her for several hours, so my wife called the local police to do a health and welfare inspection. The officer had our daughter call us from his phone. Apparently, he had found out what was happening and smashed her phones and would not let her leave. The neighbor now refused to be involved, so a former soldier of my wife's offered to drive out and pick her up. As he happened to be a police officer about 2 hours away, the other officer waited for him to arrive. Once our friend arrived, our daughter had changed her mind and refused to leave. Nothing we could do changed her mind, and she is still there. Tim still doesn't have a job, though they are now married and she just gave birth to another grandchild. Tim insisted that she go back to work the week after, since he cannot get a job due to his record. Our daughter sends us pictures, but she is always sure that they include Tim. The last picture we received was him holding the new baby and making something in the kitchen, while smoking. Edit. Thanks for all the kind words of support, everyone. My wife is of the same mind as most of you, it seems. She avoids any hint of I told you so, and we ensure she knows she is always welcome back and will cover the trip. My brother is currently dating and engaged to one of the worst people I've ever met. She is manipulative and controlling. She likes to do shitty, mean things, and when confronted will act completely innocent and play the victim. And she has on several occasions made up stories and lied for the sole purpose of causing chaos. She almost destroyed my other brother's marriage. His wife is her best friend and has all but ruined my brother's relationship with our mom and other sister. I really think she is entertained by the misery she causes. The best part of all of it, they are getting married in 11 days. Story 6. Not my daughter but my niece. When she was 14 she met a dude on the internet who was 22 and from across the country. We were not happy. He came to visit and he was the weirdest dude I ever met. I was only 4 years older and tried to have conversations with him, but he was just monosyllabic. Exactly the kind of dude who you would expect to hit on 14-year-olds in anime forums on the internet. Of course we watched them like a hawk and they were never left alone together. I still admire my sister. She firmly put down the rules: no being alone together, no sleeping in the same room, etc., but never said anything against the relationship. The whole thing ended pretty much right after his visit. If my sister had forbidden it, I am sure it would have gone on much longer. Edit. I get this is a thing people feel very strongly about. My niece was and is safe. You want to disagree about how the situation was handled, that's cool, but personal attacks are really unnecessary. Also, since people keep saying it in my country, the age of consent is 14. Nothing illegal happened, so we couldn't go to the police. Story 7. Her ex-husband, the cop, who broke into her house after the divorce and raped her in front of the children. Thankfully the maggot did time in prison for that. I didn't figure this would even get noticed, as I commented late. The full story: my father had a massive brain aneurysm. They had taken him to a hospital 5 hours away. I had just arrived there when my ex-husband called me and said my daughter was on the way to the hospital and told me what had happened. It was definitely rape. For someone who mentioned, was it really, or did she just say that when the children saw them, there was no question due to the trauma? He stands 64, my daughter is 411 and weighs 100 pounds. The kicker was that we found out he had a bit of a history of being a predator, as he was one of those cops that would solicit favors when he stopped women. They could get out of a ticket if the department he worked for got wind of this and they reached some agreement, whereas he would quietly retire and nothing would be on his record. I can't remember exactly how my daughter found this out, but I know it was shortly before the trial and someone came to her about it. So yes, he did time. He is now out. There is a restraining order in effect for 7 years, and most likely that will easily be renewed. He has taken her to court I don't know how many times in the last couple of years, trying to get the restraining order lifted because he states it is keeping him from gaining employment, since it's attached to a rape, SMH. He represents himself every time he comes to court. It's almost comical. He's narcissistic and psychotic. I call him maggot. The kids were all in therapy. They're great kids, very well adjusted. She's an amazing gal. She's 3 months from her master's, works full-time, and has never missed one of the kids' activities. They dealt with it and moved on. To quote Shakespeare, though she be but little, she is fierce. My sister is married to a guy who has 2 swastikas tattooed on his back. Nuff said. Edit. He got them while in prison when he joined the Aryan Brotherhood. He definitely isn't Buddhist. Story 8. My sister is dating a guy who is A to everyone he meets, but cries when you give it right back to him. He is also an enabler to her depression and anxiety. Instead of trying to encourage her to fix herself, he tells her that she doesn't need to and he will do it for her. Story 9. Obligatory. Not a son or daughter scenario, but my older brother dated a girl who pretended that she broke all of her bones in a car wreck. She put both of her arms in slings, put braces on her legs, and a travel pillow around her neck. I remember asking her about her back if all of her bones were broken anyway, and she started to cry. LOL. They didn't last long. Story 10. My sister dated this dickhead that would make her cry about once every 2 months. He posted something to Facebook that had a picture of a notebook and something like, if you come home and expect your husband to work around the house, you're going to have a bad marriage, inside the book. She broke up with him just a month ago. Edit. Thank you Skaggledrink for helping me find the original image the guy reposted. Story 11. Son dated a girl who said she had a friend who needed a ride to the prom. I agreed. Day of the prom, she says, oh, he's in this town in the next state. I left work at 10 a.m., drove 3 hours, picked up this kid, brought him home. He has no prom clothes, not even a suit. Luckily, we're close enough in size that I can lend him one. I lend him suit, shirt, tie, buy him dress shoes, pay for haircut. We're late, so the pre-prom dinner my kid had planned is out the window. Picture's not possible because we don't have time. We get one decent snap. Guess who's in the center? Yep, out-of-state dude. Girlfriend ended up spending the entire prom with this dude. Apparently he was an ex. They go to an after party. My son is left behind. He gets his own ride home, but doesn't stop by to drop off my suit tie. Later, we find out girlfriend and out-of-state dude had babby making session at some point during that night. Babby was formed. Who is the father? According to girlfriend, my son is. Complication they never had, according to him. She would have gotten away with it to some degree but had the bad judgment to tell friends that it was actually out-of-state dude. Fortunately, my son found out and broke it off with her. To be honest, I could have written all that off as youthful idiocy. But a few months into the pregnancy, she has to come to our house and tell me that her parents were kicking her out, and would it be okay if she moved into my finished basement apartment so her babby wouldn't be homeless? Like WTF, the end of the story is that out-of-state dude heard that he was the babby daddy and came back to bring her home with him. And as far as I know, they are still living in his parents' trailer. Edit a point of clarification. The reason I was willing to pick the other kid up was that he was a different girl's prom date. They were part of a large group of kids all going to prom together. She was my son's girlfriend's best friend, and the kids all chipped in for gas and toll money to bring this kid in. The guy I picked up used to live in state but moved away in the middle of senior year. Probably too much detail, but no, I didn't see be my son, at least not intentionally. Edit 2. Someone asked what happened when the girl wanted to stay with us. It wasn't quite a slam the door in her face moment, but we said we couldn't support her and referred her to Youth and Family Services. She eventually moved in with the girl who was supposed to have been the dude's prom date, possibly the only situation that could have been more awkward. Edit 3. Some people are commenting that it's crazy to drive all that way and do all that stuff for someone else's kid. What you have to understand is that this bunch was mostly from families with very limited means. The kind of families where good clothes to go to a prom are light years out of budget. Being a dad sometimes means stepping up when other parents have failed or aren't financially capable of coming through. My son's girlfriend's best friend, the dude's original prom date, had never been to a formal dance. She wasn't even planning on going. She's not my kid, but I don't regret going the extra 150 miles to fetch her prom date. Her excitement at the prospect of going to prom with a guy she thought liked her made it 100 worth it. I regret that he was in, but I had no way to know that ahead of time. Story 12. My sister dated a guy, let's call him Tom, who worked under my dad at the business he owns and runs. Now I'm not saying Tom was a loser because worked for our family. My sister and I both work in similar positions and that's how they met, but there were a number of instances that just shouted, hey, what's up, I'm Tom and I'm a loser. For example, Tom seemed to never have any money, usually blaming things like his rent being too high or his car needing to be worked on. Due to this, my sister ended up having to pay for the majority of the dates and dinners that they went on. In reality, he had spent most of his money on unnecessary toys like dirt bikes, guns, and modifications for his 1999 Honda Civic. His spending habits got so bad that his landlord threatened him with eviction. This tore my sister up, not because he was getting evicted but because she knew that he was making enough money to never be in that type of situation. Anyway, Tom got the bright idea to ask her and my father for the rent money, $650, while they were out to dinner. My dad ended up helping him out so he wouldn't go homeless, but what he didn't know was that Tom had asked him for more money than what his rent was so he could go out and spend it on other things other than my sister. So yeah, he was a loser and I didn't like him much. Story 13. My little sister dated a guy who kept trying to convince her to drop out of a UC school and move into his mom's garage with him, up to and including threatening suicide if she didn't. It took way too much effort on my dad and my part to get her to put the kibosh on that relationship, mostly because the guy's mom thought my sister was good for him and tried to fight us on it. Story 14. I'm driving my daughter home and she says, oh, I forgot to tell Benjamin what house number we are. I'm a mite confused by this. I've heard about Benjamin before, but there was never any indication he was going to come over or anything. Me, why does Benjamin need to know our house number, daughter, so he can sleep over? We're going to get married. At that point I nearly drove off the road, but luckily we were almost home and I drove into the driveway. So this Benjamin was engaged to my daughter, and I haven't even met him yet, hadn't even heard she was dating. What absolute, absurd nonsense. So definitely this Benjamin guy my daughter's for, by the way. I almost drove off the road because I was laughing so hard. Edit people, Benjamin is also 4, he's a kid in her daycare class. Stop being gross. Story 15. Funny enough, every father of any girl I have ever dated thinks I am a loser. It usually starts with something along the lines of I don't like your name, and usually goes downhill from there. Story 16. My sister dated them all. My favorite was a guy who convinced her to have joint bank accounts and stole 6 months worth of pay from her. We didn't know until after the relationship. The dude was a major conman salesman type that had like 4 different get-rich-quick schemes while they dated. Edit spelling. Story 17. As nice as my brother-in-law is, he is pretty terrible in terms of job goals, life ambitions. He hasn't worked a steady job for almost 10 years or so and is now pushing like 40. He had been a UPS driver and either lost that job or was laid off or something, and since then, he has just done oddball things to kind of keep money in, but nothing has flourished or lasted long. He was going to be a singing coach, he was going to do lawn maintenance, and currently his next big venture is dog walk sitting. Consequently, my sister works 3 jobs to keep their family comfortable and to support my niece. It wouldn't be so terrible if he did more stuff around the house, but after this past visit to their home, I don't think he does much of anything other than sit around and watch TV and maybe make dinner every once in a while. My dad has tried subtly talking to her about the situation, but she says she's happy with her life, but sometimes her tone says something else. Edit. Oh wow, you make one comment before you leave work and it blows up. just wanted to thank you guys for the kind words and suggestions. Both my family and even my BIL's mother have kind of broached the subject over the last couple years, but the two of them seem to live in their own world. The times my sister has kind of talked with our dad about it, she seems to retract the next day. I have no doubt that my BL loves my sister and niece, but he also just seems pretty lazy. That being said, he'll make a more conscious effort to let my sister know that I and the rest of our family are here if she needs us. Story 18. I dated a lot of stupid, just plain dumb guys in high school. One of the worst mistakes was my boyfriend's sophomore year told me he had lung cancer because he's been smoking cigarettes since he was 8. He wrote me like this weird journal letter about it. I didn't believe him for a second, but continued dating him for another month or so. He's married with a kid now, so I'm pretty sure the cancer thing wasn't true. LMAO. Story 19. If my parents used Reddit, they would probably mention my ex-boyfriend who I dated long distance online from 19 to 22. He lived with his parents, didn't want to get a job, smoked weed all day and did mushrooms for clarity. Forced me to avoid talking to others or even go out with my family to do things because he would blow up my phone saying I was cheating due to his lousy ex-relationship he was cheated on during. He had a kid at 18 during a drunken one-night stand and had to babysit her every week while complaining about her grandmother, who was taking care of her because the mother didn't want her. He didn't pay child support, so he had to guiltily take care of the kid at every beck and call of the grandmother. Lashed out at me constantly and would starve himself for days to make me feel bad about literally anything that mildly bothered him. Generally needed a lot of help that he refused to get. I was at a really low point in my life and thought I was worthless and that he was the only one that could love me. I know my parents wouldn't get into my love affairs, but they were absolutely thrilled when I finally grew self-worth and got out of it. I had always pieced together information about him to them because I knew they wouldn't approve, and every time I said more they held back but were obviously thinking he was trash. I cringe extremely hard when I remember all of it. Story 20. Blake, we took him into our home for a few months, so he could save up some money. Our internet bill went through the roof. I think he played video games. Then one day Independence Day he dumped her, all while his clan from Texas was camping in our yard on the way to a music festival. I guess I should have keyed in when he mentioned he had moved multiple times. Story 21. Brother's girlfriend hit my English bulldog with a shovel because he was barking and it scared her as she showed up unexpectedly at my parents' house around 1 a.m. He is still with her because she's lonely and has no friends or family, maybe because she's a psychotic. Story 22. My sister dated this douchebag. He lived in a house his dad owned and she moved in with him. He stayed at home slinging cocaine. She held respectable jobs. He was a general, stole drugs from his mom and such. They bought a shitty Firebird together with her money, but he titled it in his name. When she finally left him, my father and I drove the Firebird and parked it in our garage, covered all the windows looking in. He would call us every day and rant to us how he was going to call the cops and or kick our. After telling a sob story to the DMV, we ended up getting this saint of a supervisor who transferred the title to my sister's name, so she could sell the heap of junk and recoup some of her money. Story 23. My son's girlfriend. She's two-timed on him with one of his friends, can barely read or write and is unemployed. My wife keeps saying they're in 3rd grade, what do you expect, but I think she's going easy on her. Story 24. One of my friends brought her new boyfriend to our weekly church youth group meetup. He openly bragged about how he could manipulate anyone into doing whatever he wanted and tried to dominate all of the other guys in the room by proving how much smarter, stronger, more athletic he was. She pulled the plug pretty quickly. Story 25. An alcoholic, unemployed, homeless bum who lied about his age when I first met him. Daughter met him when she was in a mental institution for suicidal gestures. He was there, and being discharged the same day, so naturally she invited him home to live with us. He told us he was 26, except that I know what 26 looks like, and he wasn't it. He was 40. He admitted to that a year later or so. We went out once and left him home alone. Bad choice. I know, and in just about an hour, he managed to find and drink all of the alcohol in the house, which wasn't much, until you start factoring in things you wouldn't have thought of, including mouthwash and vanilla flavoring. Another time he used his food stamps to buy every bottle of vanilla flavoring he could, and then got wasted on that. Daughter moved in with him when he got a job and started making money. Then he raped her and beat her up and was buddy-buddy with the police, and they did the boys will be boys thing, and he got off while she got PTSD. Fortunately, she did not reproduce with this, and so the only physical losses were some old toys of hers that I gave her, a television and some dishes. And now we have a grandcat. Story 26. My mom once dated my boss. She was older. It took me a while to get over it, but I finally did when I saw how hard he tried for her. He then dumped her at a birthday lunch that he planned with balloons and everything at a nice Italian place once he learned the age difference. Story 27. My dad doesn't Reddit, but my parents hated my ex. We met when we were 16 and were on and off for 4 years. He constantly cheated on me and was just a person. I ended up pregnant at 18 and I worked through most of pregnancy. While he didn't do, I got him a job but he didn't keep it. I broke up with him when my daughter was 8 months old, about 5 months after my mom passed away. He hasn't been in mine or my daughter's life for about 4 years. His loss, she's amazing. Story 28. My daughter dated a guy who was a shitty, lying, lazy, abusive, gaslighting. Besides that, he 1 dropped out of high school at 14, 2 never attempted to get a GE diploma equivalency, 3 had more than 1 conviction for public intoxication, underage drinking, drunk driving. which left him 4 unable to get a job for approximately 18 months of the about 2 years they were together. 5 got fired from Walmart after only working 2 weeks. For missing work because his kid supposedly was victim of an abduction attempt. Turns out the kid made it up. 6 smoked weed in her apartment bathroom. Knowing that if my daughter failed a drug screen her career would be ruined. 7 had his 2 kids every other weekend, but spent the entire time with headphones on gaming, meaning my daughter had to watch his kids or they destroy her apartment. 8 would only eat corn or potatoes, hamburgers or chicken fingers, or pizza, but fast food was a-okay. 9 never picked up after himself. So every horizontal surface was covered in half-drunk pop cans, fast food wrappers, cups and bags, dirty plates, moldy food. Daughter is an RN and worked 12-hour shifts, which is sort of an excuse. 10 punched a hole in her apartment wall. 11 held a gun to his own head, then laughed at her for taking him seriously. 12 constantly accused her of cheating, so she had to unfriend all males on her Facebook, including her father. 13 threatened to leave when her anxiety and depression had her sleeping any time she wasn't at work. And 14 when she finally took him up on his bluff, it was during a terrifying food-throwing, soda-hurling, furniture-smashing temper tantrum that had her grab her cats from under the bed and come to my house 50 miles away. I could go on, but remembering all that is turning my stomach. In cleaning her apartment afterward, we had to wash the walls from where he had done a Hollywood-style sweep of the coffee table top, spraying Dr. Pepper all over the carpet, TV and stand, wall, and canvas art, all the way to the ceiling. Then for good measure he smashed the coffee table. He was a complete tool, and with the help of a therapist she is finally getting back to the funny, intelligent, confident girl she was before he messed her head up. I am thrilled I don't have to dread that phone call. You know the one, where she was calling to say he'd beaten her. There would have been a long line of people wanting to pull his ballstrings up through his throat. Believe me, or worse, one from a coroner. Story 29. My sister was in an emotionally abusive, on the verge of physically abusive relationship with a narcissist. She got pregnant by him, and upon the birth of their daughter they found out she had severe medical complications. I won't go into too much detail, but they had to choose to let her pass or put her through multiple surgeries and treatments that she possibly wouldn't survive or make it out of the hospital from. This nut job had her so brainwashed that he convinced her to let their daughter pass away without trying to save her because he didn't want to deal with it. He even slept on the couch in the hospital room while my sister stayed up all night holding her as she passed away. My niece passed away less than 2 weeks after she was born. Within a week of her passing, he tells my sister she is fat and needs to lose weight among other terrible things, and goes out using the fact that his daughter just died to draw pity from someone in order to get laid. I'm thoroughly convinced that this POS never gave about his daughter or my sister. Thankfully she found the strength to leave him, but still has extreme guilt over the entire situation. Story 30. My kid dated this narc a couple years back. He was with her friend first, and told everyone this girl was completely bat crazy and he was trying to help her. What we didn't know was he was driving her crazy, and she got a lot better after they broke up. He gets with my daughter, who is no longer talking to said friend because said friend attacked my daughter after being egged on by this guy. He proceeds to gaslight the heck out of her, cheat on her, blame her for literally everything, and make her feel not good enough for anyone, let alone him. She was in a really dark place and he knew it. They break up, and years later he still finds a way to get a hold of her to tear her down. If I could run this over I so freaking would. Story 31. Obligatory. Not my son-daughter, but my fiancé's ex was a keeper. Classic high school bad boy that went nowhere. Dude's a piece of garbage, extremely manipulative. She had a kid with him in high school. He's 4 years older than her, so was 20 with a 16-year-old real winner. Story 32. An ex stabbed me in the thigh with an X-Acto blade once. Full blade in the thigh. I could see my muscles working, and had to pick out the pant fibers. Want to know why he stabbed me in the thigh? Well, I have 2 toes on each foot that are webbed. He wanted me to let him cut those instead. Story 33. I like threads like these for giving me perspective. Not that they are an excuse to be a lazy slob, but to prevent myself from doing irrational things like internally calling myself a lazy slob because I don't have the discipline to do a PhD. Story 34. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but my sister is married to Google this guy who kidnapped and raped 2 girls at UTSA. They got together when she was 13 and he was 27-ish. Mom tried to get him arrested, but cops wouldn't do even though they admitted to having, and mom wanted to press charges. Story 35. I can answer this for my parents. He was a up kid with up parents who didn't give about him. It wasn't his fault in the beginning, but it definitely was his fault later. He was pretty heavy into drugs and treated me like. My parents let him and his friend move in with us when I was 16 because his parents had put him out in the street. Ran up $100K in credit card debt in my parents' names by stealing the card numbers while they were sleeping. We didn't know it until the cards kept getting higher and higher since he'd used them for things we would shop for it. He even had faux cards made so they'd swipe. He beat the out of me one day with a table leg he broke off. I was 18. He was massively high on Xanax and had a case of beer in him. They even paid $5K to get him moved to another state because he wanted to go and they saw it as an out for me. He ended up dying last year by being up and walking on a highway and getting hit by a car. I felt bad for his kids because they only knew the good in him since they're so young, but honestly, he hadn't changed one bit, so I breathed a little sigh of relief for his girlfriend and the kids. Story 36. Sadly, it's always been me who is the loser, dating girls so I wasn't alone and manipulating them to keep them from figuring out I was a piece of, and they could easily do better. It took getting diagnosed with depression and getting on meds and therapy to see how up I was. When I started dating the current girl I'm with, I told her, her best friend and her mom how I used to be and asked them to call me out if they see me doing it again. So much it is habit that I don't even know what's unhealthy until I'm told. Also, my parents never gave me a good example or a healthy relationship, so I'm figuring it out as I go. How? Story 37. I once had a first date with this guy who was sweet but clingy and texting every second. Later on he goes on about future between us and calling me his girlfriend, and I ended the date and he threatened to cut himself and blew up my phone constantly. He scared me so much I blocked his number.